Hello, Alma.
Well, hello. How are you doing today, Iris?
I am very good. How are you?
Well, I just got my booster shot this morning,
Good for
and
you.
for those of you where it's the first time here, I think we should do a little intro to say because people might have no idea where they are. Welcome to Two Moms No Fluff. We are Iris and Alma, and we talk about all things related to parenting kids with disabilities, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Today, our topic is going to be mostly bad and ugly. So you're going to have to listen to. We're going to be talking about what it's like going into the community with our child with a disability, and we're going to be telling kind of the not so great stories. However, we always want to give some positive stories, something that's really productive. So the next episode, I think we decided we're going to talk about how to some positive stories about us going into the community. But today we're just kind of going to vent. Well, I think we deserve that, right, Iris?
Definitely. Oh my gosh, I so need the venting.
And venting is not a negative thing. Negative venting is about processing. It's about hoping for things to be better in the future and really thinking about how we want our lives to be in the future and what we can do to strategize to make things better in the future. But today we're just going to give you might, some of these stories might not resonate with you, but some might. And if none of them do, then you're just a voyeur. You're just a
Yes.
voyeur or a voyeuse. So enjoy. But anyway, this morning, let's get back to this morning. I got my booster shot today at the last second. The positive thing about one of my kids who was late for school again, and I had to drive her. We won't mention any names, but because I was out of the house so early, because someone else was supposed to drive her this morning, because I was out of the house so early and drove this person, I know I already said her, but whatever. So we all know who it is. But the good thing about that was that I was like, okay, you know what? Let me go get my booster, because I tried to get it yesterday, but I couldn't because my child, I'll say, called me early to pick them up from school. So I didn't have time to go, but I went this morning and I ran into the manager of Essex County, New Jersey, where I live. His name is Joey DiVincenzo. And for those of you who don't know, he was instrumental when Iris, the amazing advocate, uh, uh, was advocating for more equipment that was truly universally accessible in Bloomfield, New Jersey, where she used to live. They did put in a lot of what they thought was universal access equipment, but there wasn't quite enough. And this, we'll talk about this in another episode, but it's always important to discuss what is actually truly universally accessible with people who have children and adults who need universally accessible equipment, because the ADA recommends certain things that are not actually 100% fully accessible to 100% of the population. So,
Correct.
Iris, I want to, as always, commend you for your amazing advocacy. Before she moved from New Jersey, she really pushed for this and got other people to help her, got tons of signatures uh, on a petition to get more equipment. And I got to hand it to Essex County and Joey DiVincenzo, who was able to get this done. And we got more universally accessible equipment. But Iris then left town during COVID and moved away. But she's doing it now in the town that she lives in Michigan. So she is just spreading the universally accessible equipment and playgrounds wherever she plants her new roots. So thank you,
Yes.
Iris. And just so you know, Joey D said, boy, she is a great advocate. I felt like I was like dropping names. I was like, I'm friends with Iris. Remember Iris, who helped get the equipment done? And he said, oh, I remember her. She was an amazing advocate, and I would have done the same thing for my kids. So that is a good story that we're starting off with today.
That is a good story. I am sure the man is traumatized. I don't think it happens to him every day that someone screams and yells at him in public. So
Well,
sometimes
it got the job done.
Yes, it got the job done. And I have to give it to him that they put like so much more money into that park after it was already done. And it was made like a dream playground for wheelchair users. So that's great. And the ADA, as you just mentioned, is just a minimum standard for accessibility. this is like a starting point. It's not like the end of the means. Like we really need to remember that. And there's so much more that needs to be done in terms of accessibility that hopefully this podcast would help bring it to the forefront of some people that wouldn't think about it on a normal basis, and we can kind of raise awareness like this.
Yeah. Well,
so
this is, and this is a perfect segue into what we're going to be talking about going into the community. You wanted to bring your child into the community by bringing her to a playground. She shows up in the playground, and what happens when they had finished the playground, promising you that it was universally accessible? What happened?
Correct.
You tell the
It's
rest?
not. Yes. Yeah. No, I basically, I think that we can probably do another separate episode just on the playground and accessibility in general. But at the end of the day, I think what added an insult to injury is that the playground was literally in front of our house. They called it an all access playground, and my daughter couldn't do anything there. So that was,
it was painful.
Very painful. So I was like, this I can't live with, and I must kind of advocate and change. But basically, I think today, if you're up to it, I would talk about not how environment affects our participation, but how people can sometimes rub us the wrong way with some interesting stories. I think that the value in us sharing our personal stories is that other moms in a similar situation were in similar positions as well. And sometimes it's so nice to hear that another person is going through a similar experience. And in contrary to you, Alma, that always have your head connected to the rest of your body, I tend to get a brain freeze every single time that people shock me with their reactions to my daughter, to our family. And I wish like I could like rewind and go back and tell them what I really think about them, but I don't. And one of the incidents that I kind of sort of managed to actually say something to someone was when my daughter was really young. I used to travel a lot with her for therapy. So we would like find ourselves in hotels and stuff on our own. And when she was small enough, instead of like going with a wheelchair, I would take a McLaren stroller, for everyone who's familiar, because it's an umbrella stroller. It folds really small and it's kind of doable. And as I was like walking around kind of in a hotel breakfast bar, looking for plastic flavor eggs and other things to kind of feed her and myself breakfast, I'm kind of pushing the stroller with one hand and getting the food with the other. And I sit down with her and I need to kind of feed her in the stroller. And this person shows up out of nowhere and he looks at me and tells me, "Are you going to keep her in a stroller until she's 18?
So, Iris, I wish I could go back there and, give you a big hug or punch that person in the face.
Yeah. But I think so. The only thing I could come up with is like, "Sir, this child has a brain injury. She's probably going to stay in the wheelchair until she's 18 and more." And he just left the scene.
Did you say that?
Yes.
Oh, you wish you said that.
No, I did say that.
Oh my gosh, then why do you need to rewind and go back?
Yeah, because I had some more educational stuff to say in retrospect. But usually that doesn't happen. This is my story of like actually getting my act together. The rest of my stories are pretty miserable. But yes, it's kind of like...
I just want to qualify before we even go any further. I think that so many people, I don't want to blame people. Because I could go on blaming people and being angry and being mad. And I think a lot of us can be like that. I think that what we can do is channel our frustration and our sadness and our fear and our shock when those kinds of things happen, and really channel them into education. And we can't, for so many of us, we're so sick and tired of having to educate everyone. But the truth is that society is not at a place where people know what to say, know what to do. And a lot of people have a very narrow idea of what's appropriate, sad to say. And, as much, it's definitely the higher road. It's really hard to take that higher road when we are so, because it pains us when that kind of stuff happens. It is like a punch in the stomach. And to gather, to muster all of your strength to be able to educate people instead, it takes a lot of energy. But I will say that over time, as I'm sure you can agree and attest to, Iris, and all of you out there who have kids who are a little bit older, eventually it's not as upsetting, not as shocking, sort of, because we get desensitized to it because it happens so often. But if we can muster the energy to, if we're in a good place and we're not as stressed out as we, can be, to educate someone, say, I have to be honest with you. I mean, I think that a way to really get that person to really never forget that interaction would be what would be, I mean, I have my own ideas, but you tell me what you could you say to that person so that they never forget
So
and learn something.
I think actually that person was the only person that I kind of managed to put in their place. But
Mhm.
in general, I can give you a whole bunch of stories like that, or like us sitting in a restaurant with our children and someone coming to us and asking in front of our children, what is wrong with her, pointing at my daughter.
Oh,
Another example, like, and I'm like, I didn't say it, but I'm like, what's wrong with you? Or what disease does she have? And I'm like, she doesn't have any disease. She's healthy, which is what my husband actually managed to say one day to someone. But my other reaction in my brain, because I'm such a rude person, my internal person, right? I was like, I don't know which disease she has, but it's contagious, so just move away. But
or to say, oh, I was going to ask you the same thing. What disease do you have?
yeah, but at the end
Again,
of
these
the
are
day,
internal. These are
yes,
internal monologues.
exactly. But at the end of the day, what I really think, Alma, is at the root of this is that kind of maybe like gestalt psychology. People see a phenomenon that they are not familiar with, and they try to name it or to make sense of it for themselves.
Yes.
And I have a general rule of thumb. If you see something out in the community that seems abnormal to you, odd in such a way, or doesn't really fit the Stanz, I don't know how to say it in English, but at the end of the day, give the person the benefit of the doubt, and instead of judging, accept, and instead of judging, try to appreciate and try to understand and be compassionate. And if there is a child in a store that you visit and that's throwing a tantrum that is totally not age appropriate, instead of judging the parent and like going around with your, showing your disrespect to how she kind of, I guess, educates or disciplines her child, understand that if it's not a regular or a scene that you would see normally, there's probably something behind there that you don't know, that you don't understand, and be compassionate. Just if you can, maybe offer something to help, but if you can't, just let them be and forgive. We're all dealing with so many things, and some of it, I'm sorry, we can't explain to you right here, right now, but just let us be.
Yeah. And it's exhausting to have to be, again, this is something that happens all the time with parents of kids with disabilities. And as we've mentioned before, the idea that that we, oftentimes we have a lot of stress and we have our own baggage or our own histories that bring us to the present moment. And so we might still be in tremendous pain or feeling grief about something that just happened, or that getting a diagnosis for our child. And again, it has nothing to do with our child. This really has to do with how society deals with people who are different. So I don't want to, we never want to blame the child for having a disability or make judgments about our own kids and, say, you've caused me all this pain. You're the reason for my grief. It's really, when we dig deeper, so much of our feelings when we're upset are about the fact that we are all othered, that we are all being treated differently. And that doesn't feel good. Even if people are being nice about us being different, it doesn't feel good to be different in our society. And I wish that, the celebrate difference buttons that I remember coming out in the 90s when I was, or 80s, or I just remember that was a big thing. And then people put the kibosh on celebrate difference. They thought it was I don't know, not politically correct. I don't know. But why can't we celebrate difference? There's so many amazing things about our kids. But when these things happen, it's such a societal shift that needs to happen where people, it's not so strange to see somebody who behaves in a different way than your child did. There should be no negative judgment on it. It should simply be like, oh, that's different from me. So let me give some stories. So something that I used to have to do in the early days, and I should qualify that. I didn't have to bring my son out when he had a feeding tube and when I was pumping for milk when he was an infant. But I did it in front of other people because I, as an individual, did not want to be isolated. It was so important for me to get out into the community, whereas a lot of other people might have only um, fed their child through a feeding tube in the privacy of their own home where there was no one there. I was determined to, as much as possible, not have my life be, my activities be hindered by the fact that every few hours I had to feed through a feeding tube or I had to pump, having my breasts exposed, covered with the suction cups, but that I was going to go out to friends' houses. I was going to, I had other children. I wanted to go take them on play dates with other people. And from day one, I was very open about the feeding tube. Not everybody's like that. And no judgment here, but just for my own personality, I needed to get outside. So I made that decision very early on. So I was sort of, expecting people to look at me and to, if I were in a waiting room or something when I was feeding my kid, sometimes people did stare and I felt like they stared a little too long. And, uh, I think in those very early days, I didn't say anything, but it upset me that they were staring, even though I was out, in the open. So, going back, maybe, in retrospect, I could have said, are you wondering why I'm doing this? Or, for me, I could have said that, or it was perfectly fine that I didn't say anything. But I think it is important for people to know that it's not polite. It's not really polite to stare. And it makes, these were adults I'm talking about, not children who were staring, to let them know that, even, if you feel comfortable saying something like, it's making me a little uncomfortable that you're staring. If you have a question, I'm happy to answer it. But this is my child and I'm simply feeding my child. So there are myriad, responses you could have to somebody behaving that way. And it depends completely on your own comfort level. But that was something that did bother me, that people would stare, even though, when I was out in the public. And some people might have said, well, if you don't want people staring, don't go outside. But it's the same thing I feel about breastfeeding. Our kids have every right to be fed. They need to be fed, and we have every right to do it wherever we want. It's, do I tell you, don't eat that McDonald's hamburger in front of me? It's offensive or it's weird, so I'm going to stare at you. No, our child needs to be fed. I have so many stories. I don't even know where to go. Do you have another one, Iris, that you want to
of course.
talk about?
I actually, first of all, definitely the nursing and breastfeeding, it's an issue by itself, but people in general really do tend to stare when they see something that is a bit out of the ordinary. And I actually have a story of how my daughter, when she was about 5, she got her first power wheelchair. It was like a big Permobil K450. It's a huge pink chair that she got. And by itself, it attracts a lot of attention. Now, add to that there was like a tiny kind of a seat behind that we used to pluck my son or sometimes other kid at the back of it. There is a service dog attached to that wheelchair. And then my daughter, when she's excited, she's constantly waving her hands and legs. And when she's happy, she also makes these like, I don't know, like grunting sounds and wandering around, driving with her head, which people also can't understand how she's driving because they don't see her hands touching anything. So it attracts the movement, the colors, the sound. It attracts a lot of attention.
I've seen it, people, and it's like a party on wheels,
Exactly.
with an entourage.
Yes. So one day we were at a museum, and the person at the back of the chair wasn't my son, it was their cousin. She was like driving behind my daughter, and she was about 6, and she was like starting to say out loud, looking at people, people, why are you looking at us? Why is everybody staring? Why are you looking at us? And she
That's
started
great.
reflecting to people that, she was not used to the attention. My
Right.
children kind of grew up with this, and they
Yeah.
didn't even have the screen to kind of verbalize the experience. But I remember that day, and I remember that people were like, oh, okay, she's calling us to order, and stop staring and turned around. But the staring is an interesting phenomena. And it's also, sometimes I envision myself like putting a camera on my daughter's wheelchair and recording the gaze, the people, like,
oh wow,
like,
that would be so
it's
interesting.
just it's so bizarre. Sometimes I walk like a few meters behind her, and I'm just like, wow. It's a phenomenon. It's just human nature. And both of us, because we're also kind of professionals in the field, we know how to educate, how to share knowledge, how to advocate and all that. But still, when we're in the mother's shoes, we forget all of that, and we're really emotional about it. And it's an interesting situation.
It can push a lot of buttons. It can bring, we're just living in the world with our families, and this is the norm for us. So it's sort of like, the negative side of being a celebrity. It's like, stop looking at me, I just want to be anonymous. I just, we are just a family, and we want to fit in. We just want to be a part of the world. And when those things happen, it's a constant reminder that we're different. And I guess we can reframe it and look at every opportunity as an opportunity to educate, just simply by being out in the world. But that gets exhausting. It really gets exhausting. So please have some compassion. I was going to say take pity, but no, do not take pity on us, because we do not need your pity. We just need to be in the world, and we are a family that might seem a little different from your family, but that's, just be conscious. It's important for people to be conscious of not making people feel uncomfortable and different. Another story that I have that actually doesn't even include my son being present, but going out into the community, just as the individuals who we are, with the experiences we've had. I'm going to talk about when my niece was with us. I remember we were in a toy store, and I was with, I don't even remember, a couple of my kids and my niece, and we were on the line for the toy store, and there were a couple of women in front of me who were talking with each other. And one of the women was talking about an experience she had, and she was a grown woman, and she literally just threw out the R word and said, she was talking about something that happened to her, and she was telling her friend something like, yeah. So I was like, what are you, the R word? And I stood there, and again, my son wasn't there, who has the disability, but I think one or two of my other kids were there, and my niece was there, who was a teenager at the time, and or maybe even in her 20s. And she looked at me and she says, you have to say something. And I saw at that moment that it was really important for me to say something, because they were looking to me, my niece was looking to me as someone to educate. And, she was, I guess, too young and too uncomfortable to do it herself, but she was looking to me, and I had a responsibility to her and to people in general, to educate. So as uncomfortable as it was, because I don't like to make people feel uncomfortable, but so many emotions were going through me at that time. I was angry. I was, I had judgments about this woman, thinking like, oh my God, like how juvenile that this is a grown woman using this. But sad to say, this is a word that people grew up with, and there are, so many responses. Oh, I didn't mean it in that way. I just meant that blah, blah, blah. We all know that response, but it is unacceptable to use that word at all. Unless you're talking about an actual, term like mental retardation. And some people don't even like using that word, those two words, but I felt a responsibility. So I had to say to this woman, and I said it in a very nice way. And again, had my son been there, so I want to point out that we're going to be able to feel differently about giving a response depending on the situation. So because my son wasn't there, I didn't have as much going on in my head because I would have also had the added concern of him feeling bad if I had a conversation, because I would have thought, okay, maybe he didn't hear them say that, maybe I should just be quiet. But because he wasn't there, and I had the added, responsibility of my niece being there, saying to me, like, I need you to do this, is what she was really saying, because this is important. And she was right. I said to the woman, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have a son who actually is mentally retarded. And that word is really offensive. And oh boy, did her face turned bright red. I can assure you that that woman will probably never, ever use that term again. I said the truth. I educated her, that this was a hurtful word. And, of course, she immediately came back and said, I am so sorry. She could have said, I didn't mean it that way. And she didn't make any excuses, which I appreciated and respected. She just said, I'm really sorry. And I said, yeah, please, just, I just educated. That's all I did.
Yeah.
But to make it personal, to say my son, that is directly offensive to me. My son has this. It felt very empowering for me to be able to say that, to be able to say it calmly. And who knows if she ever said it again, but if she ever said it again, I feel like it would be an accident for her to say it again, and she would catch herself and not, really make an effort. And that's my thought, my hope, my dream, that when we have these conversations with people, that they really will take it in. But that was something that, was me going into the community, even though my child wasn't with me. He's with me in my head and with my experience. So that I thought was a significant one.
Yeah, I know this is like, this is so nice, the story, because it's just a word, a small word that triggers so many emotions.
Yes.
That can alienate, like that can hurt so badly. And I know that, again, my personal experience, when something like that happens, it's like I can feel my heart racing, and I'm
Oh
like,
yeah.
what am I supposed to say? And I'm just like, the emotion. If
Yes.
I was there to give a workshop about, terminology and disability rights and all that, I would be somewhere else with my brain and my body. But when it
Exactly.
hits so close to home, you kind of lose yourself to just the experience of actually living the situation.
Yeah.
And
And it's out of the blue. You're just absolutely not expecting it. Like you said, if you're doing a presentation, you're primed to be calm and to educate. But when it just comes out of nowhere, you're blindsided. Which might not even be a PC term. I have to look into that. So I apologize if that, I might have said something wrong just now. But it is something that it's like a sucker punch, comes out of nowhere, and we kind of lose the ability to reason sometimes, and to do, to be at our best selves.
yes, and
And we need
sometimes,
to
as
forgive
you
ourselves for that. If
correct. And sometimes, the opportunity might be there. A lot of times I really I feel that the person really is interested to understand what is going
Yes.
on with our child, because they're curious. I noticed that most of those questions of what is she suffering from, she's not
Yes.
suffering, we had a fabulous
Yeah.
day, we're enjoying our meal. Like, they come from people that are a bit older, a generation or two over, and then they just don't know any better. But my
Yeah.
daughter is there next to me. How can I
Yeah.
tell them what is wrong with her? She lives in a perfect world. She is perfect as she is. We did all the efforts that we could as parents to give her the sense that she is just wonderful, exactly the way she is, and that there is nothing wrong with her, because there is nothing wrong with her. She's different, but there's nothing wrong with her.
Exactly.
And in our house, in our family, she is perfect. The disability kind of does not exist between our four walls.
Right.
It's only when we step outside of the house that
Absolutely.
suddenly the world is not prepared for this show.
No.
And
No.
it's
And the sad thing is that when we, you know, a lot, some people, that stress is so overwhelming. Even the thought of going outside, it's so daunting to deal with that, that a lot of people end up staying home and not exposing their children to the world. I mean, if I just think about my childhood growing up in the 80s and the 70s, you know, when I was very little, um, you did not see people with disabilities. And the only times that I did start seeing people with significant disabilities was in middle school. I remember that we called junior high school back then, kids who were in our school who were literally all sequestered to the basement, and you only saw them once in a while leaving the school with other people. So it was basically telling you that these are people who cannot be included in a general population, you know, in the middle of New York City. And it just, that you would think would be such a progressive place. But even, you know, as far into, you know, the early 80s, I remember seeing those kids, and I didn't, I just remember feeling sorry for them, and because I never got a chance to see them or talk to them, so I felt bad for them. And our kids don't need to be pitied, you know. And I that was society, that was the way things were structured back then. It didn't have to do with me being a bad, condescending, patronizing person. It had to do with society doesn't allow us to intermingle with people who are different. And it's so important that we do expose our kids to the world, because they need to learn. And the only way they're going to learn, unfortunately, is through school, through education, through, you know, seeing people, through reading books about people who are different, about having people who are different in the workplace. That's the only way it's going to change. But unfortunately, for now, a lot of the work falls on us. When we all already have so much to deal with, we, you know, emotionally and practically, we're put in a position that can get really frustrating for us to constantly have to educate everyone else. And it is tough. It's tough, but it's necessary. And it does get easier. People out there with, you know, who are, if your child is just recently diagnosed, or you're at the beginning of your journey, it does get easier. And mostly because we're getting desensitized to it, but it gets easier. And our responses to people, we have more practice. But it can still be, you know, it is tough sometimes if you're not mentally prepared for it coming out of nowhere.
Yeah. I think that, you know, our experiences in our childhood or teenage years are fairly similar. Obviously, you know, I also grew up in the 80s, and I remember how it was. And segregation was the name of the game back then. It's just really sad. And we see the residual effect of it right now. And the inclusion is a very nice title, but the ignorance is still out there. And no matter what, whether you have a child with an invisible disability, or you're in a situation like mine, that when we go out, it's like a neon sign, look at us, look at us. It's just, you know, it's just, you will be facing in one way or another a situation in which society is hugging you with poison ivy. It's just, it's really hard. And you need to be prepared. I think that's in a way, you know, when I was working as a career counselor, I used to teach people how to do their elevator spiel, like knowing the one minute sentence in which they kind of answer questions. And when during I guess the first few years, I slowly developed a set of answers to different kids in different ages, explaining the situation and what's the car, what's that car, why is she driving a car, and etc. And kind of normalizing our appearance, you know, because it raised a lot of questions. But on the same token, this is, you know, what we do, what you do, what I do, and I think what we also love about each other. It's just, this is our core now. We are out there, we are advocating, we are making our families, our children be seen. We strive to always include them, to make activities that were not meant to be inclusive, and be out there, because just by being there with our families, we show the world how you parent a child with special needs or with this disability, and how they are in the environment. They can also participate. And maybe it's different, like we'll be in an art class in the museum and all the kids would be painting with their hands, but my daughter would hold you know, a stylus or a paintbrush in her mouth. And a few minutes later, you'll see that there are 4 other children trying it, to hold a paintbrush in their mouth. And they're like, first they're imitating just for fun. And then they also realize how incredibly difficult it is to do it. So if we were not there, they couldn't even, I think about the possibility of sticking a paintbrush in their mouth.
And making art with it, and making, not just sticking a paintbrush in there, making art with it. It ain't easy. And she does it.
No. And I think that at the end of the day, like, another story I have to, because it's related. Please. You were saying, like, we want to go out in the community and do a good thing and educate and share the knowledge and make other people friends of the disability community. So I'll give you an example, like another glorious fail, okay, because we love those. So Let's I go with my kids to the Crayola factory. You probably are familiar. We used to have a membership, but one time we landed there in a really busy day. I think you shouldn't go on weekends, which us as homeschooling family, I should know better than showing up in a museum in a weekend, but never mind, we did. And then you discover that there's other people in the museum, and there's lots of families with kids, because usually the kids are like 2 to 8. I think that's the age group that they aim towards. And Alma, I don't know if you're aware, but kids at that age, they really like dogs. And every family, they think that their child is special because they really like dogs. So we're in the lobby, we show our membership cards, and for 20 minutes, we can't move forward because every step we take, someone shows up. Oh, my daughter really likes dogs. Can she pet your service dog? My son. And eventually I'm just like, I have 2 kids. We want to go in. Like, that's enough. Enough is enough. And I'm like, no, you can't pet the dog. It's a working dog.
He'll bite you.
Leave us alone. And I start really barking at people. Just let us go. It was incredible. But it's
like the paparazzi.
I know. I'm there to kind of like be the good mom and explaining, but at the end of the day, I can't accommodate all the children. And I know that they all love dogs. Anyway, so at the end of the day, sometimes you are there, you're with good intentions, you're trying to be the advocate and the good person, but it just doesn't work out. I'm sorry.
And it's a beautiful thing that the kids are not afraid of your daughter in the wheelchair. They're using the wheelchair, that they're coming to you as like, oh, you have a cute dog, I'm going to pet your dog. So I would imagine that you'd also want to be accommodating to that, and because it's a way for them to be exposed to your daughter and for your daughter to be exposed to other kids, but it's hindering your ability to do what you want to do as a family. So there are probably a lot of mixed emotions there too, which makes it stressful. It's like everything can be laden with stress, so it's all about getting things to be mellower. And I just, something that you said reminded me of the fact that things change over time. So in the beginning, and the fact that your child's disability is very obvious to the world. She has cerebral palsy. She uses a wheelchair. My son's disability is invisible, until somebody starts talking to him a little bit more. They're like, what's going on here? So for a long time, after the feeding tube and the pumping, for milk in public, I had a big window where people didn't know, or a decent sized window, that there was, anything going on, because he looked like a typical neurotypical child, and we would go places. And it felt good for me to like not have to say anything, and I could just be like everybody else in the community. Sometimes people out us in the community. And I remember it was very painful for me. And again, these are stages that we go through with acceptance. So, we're talking now about the fact that we're out there and we're educating. I did not start out that way. And I know that a lot of people do not start out that way. There's a lot of, unfortunately, there's a lot of fear, I think that so much of this has to do with the, not wanting to feel isolated. So much of the fear comes from worrying that we as individuals are going to be shunned, our families are going to be not included. There's a fear of isolation, and that, at least for me, that was such a big part of this in the beginning for me. And I had gone to therapy right after my son was born, because I was traumatized, because I read up on his syndrome, and I was terrified of our future because it was written out in such a terrifying way, which I still am so angry about. It's changed a little bit since he was born, but I was so afraid, and I was so afraid that we were never going to be able to socialize. So I had, a couple of years where I was very quiet about his disability. I would allow people to know that he had a disability later on, but when I didn't have to, I kind of enjoyed that time. And I remember the therapist saying, when you have a child with a disability, it's very common for it to feel like a narcissistic injury, that there's something wrong with you. And this is again, not about our kids. This is about society and how society views disability. And we have to be part of the change. But in the beginning, for a lot of people, that's not where our head is. We're still in the phase of being afraid, for people to know our private business. So I remember I took my son to a music class when he was very little, and he was behaving like all the other kids his age. And, kids who weren't talking yet and weren't walking yet. And I remember somebody openly talking with me in the music class about him being in the special needs pre-K in town. And I will bet that nobody even heard what she was saying. I will bet that, even if they were there, they didn't even know what it was called. So they wouldn't have even known if they did hear her. And I wanted to vomit when this happened. I remember feeling like I've been outed and my son's been outed, and they're going to think about him differently. They're going to think about me differently. And I'm embarrassed to say that now, but I shouldn't be embarrassed, because this is part of the journey, and this is part of everyone's, or I don't want to say everyone's journey, some people's journey. There is this, it takes a while to get adjusted to our new normal. And again, this has nothing to do with our children. This has to do with society and how, we're made to feel, how disability is such a charged topic for people, that it's unacceptable, that it's embarrassing, and it should not be that way. But we can't help but take that in when we're expecting to have, a typical neurotypical child, and we don't. So that being said, I eventually did talk to the person who said that, because I sort of have a big mouth and I can't keep things quiet sometimes. So I did take a pause. I didn't say anything at the moment, but I did bring it up eventually to the person, how I really, and I was honest. I said, I don't want people to know. Like, I don't want people to know. I don't want people to think differently, because my big fear was that if they looked online at what he had, and she didn't mention his syndrome or anything, but I was so terrified that if people looked online and read about his syndrome, that they would want nothing to do with us. And, or they would think about us in a different way. And I didn't want to be othered, and I didn't want my son to be othered. So that was something that has always stuck in my mind. And he was probably like 1.5 at the time. And I still remember that with tremendous clarity, how that felt. Something else I want to mention, I knew that we were going to be talking about going into the community today. So I put on, once in a while, I put on this necklace before I go out. I have so much jewelry, so many things that I get from yard sales and thrift shops, that, because depending on my mood, I put on something different. This was something that I actually bought new. It was for a fundraiser. Can you believe it? I actually bought something, but I bought it because it was a fundraiser. It's a silver piece of jewelry that somebody created that says "Live Life Full," and it's for my son's syndrome, to raise money to alleviate some of the features of Prader-Willi syndrome. And I have it on a chain with something that I got from somebody, gave to everyone in my CrossFit class when I used to do CrossFit. And it's so faded now that I can't even see what it says, but it says something like, weakness is a choice. Weakness is a choice, something like that. Because I really can't read it at this point. Yeah, it says weakness is a choice. And I wear it on this necklace because it's sort of, once I leave the house, sometimes I'm like, I'm feeling like a badass today. And, I'm going to be supporting my son's disability. I'm going to go out in the world. So it's something physical that I put on when I go to certain events, that it makes me feel like proud of being an advocate. And when I'm in that headspace, to remember to put it on, it helps me. It's like a little, talisman, or a little, good luck charm, or it's just something that provides support for me. And I recommend that, even if it's just taking a pause before you go out of the house and bracing yourself for, all right, somebody might say something. What am I going to say if they say something, or if they're staring at my son because he's talking really loudly, or he is, my son has a tendency to stare too long at, he's interested in something and he doesn't have that self-awareness that, that's staring at someone. If you're interested, he does the same thing. So it's kind of funny that he does what I don't like when other people do that to him. He does that to other people.
The irony.
And then in turn, they'll stare back at him for longer. And then my heart starts racing, and I have to say to him, like, please stop, don't stare at them, Lincoln, don't stare. You're staring. I just give him that self-awareness that he doesn't know, but people are very put off by that. They don't, they're like, what's, I can see them mumbling to their friend. I see this all the time with young teens. They'll like talk to their friend about my son because my son is looking at them for a long time. These are really difficult situations that cause, it's not just going out for a walk or going to the movies. More times than not, you're going to run into some of these situations, and it's a lot. It's a lot to always, have to brace yourself for these kinds of interactions, but it's what we do, Iris. It's what we do.
Yes, and I think one of the points that are important, because we have to kind of summarize for today, is that we weren't born such great advocates. We had to learn how to do it, and I know that it's kind of really an acquired skill, and practice does make perfect, I think, eventually. But
not perfect. Perfect is the enemy of the good. Always remember.
Yes. I need to learn.
We're never going to be perfect,
Alma.
We're going to do our best. We're not going to ever be perfect.
But
except for your hair, which is so shiny, so perfectly shiny, always. And I still don't know how you do it. But anyway, get back to what you were saying.
I shampoo it every day, Alma.
Oh my gosh! Wow.
What?
That's
that's what I do.
We curly haired people, we have to wash our hair, believe it or not, like once a week to make it. Yeah, because it's when you have curly hair, you need the natural oils. So you learn something new every day, people.
I am telling you. Okay, this was a very educational segment, but at the end of the day, I just would love to hear other stories from other moms, because I don't know what is so comforting about hearing the suffering of others, but there is something comforting about it. And also, more importantly, please share success stories, because still, even this late in the game, we need tricks and some hidden, I guess, strategies of how to deal with the audience that accompanies our life. And Alma, thank you again for your amazing friendship and for sharing your amazing stories about your life and family.
Right back at you, my friend. Right back at you. And we promise that we will be doing a podcast about positive experiences we've had in the community. We don't want you to think we're these old negative ladies who are just complaining all the time. Like, we have to make room for the venting, but we also have to make room to show appreciation and gratitude for people who are doing things that are helping us in our journey, and helping everyone else, because helping us, we don't need, I shouldn't use the word help, that we all need to learn how to be with one another in society. And we might need help too. And we're going to actually talk about that in a future episode, how within the disability community, we also need to learn how to talk to other parents of kids with disabilities. So on that note, have a great week. Iris,
thank you so much.
Talk to you later.
You're the best too. Bye.
Bye.
For more information, please go to www.twomomsnofluff.com. Thank you.